Hello, Soberinos, and welcome to this week's Friday Fix. Today I'm going to be answering the question, what happens when you stop drinking? There's been a lot of conversation recently in the group and outside of the group about different people's experiences of what's going on for them now that they've stopped drinking and they're in the early days of living their lives sober. And I just want to offer some reassurance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens physically when you stop drinking, what happens mentally and emotionally when you stop drinking, what that can look like for different people, because it's never the same for everybody. It's always going to be different because we're all unique. And so what it looks like for one person is going to be different to what it looks like for another person. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it looked like for me when I first stopped drinking. So again, bear with me if you see me glancing down, because I'll be glancing at my notes. So what happens when you stop drinking? The first thing to recognize is that over time, your body has built up a tolerance to alcohol. Some degree of dependence on alcohol, but it's certainly built up a necessity to process alcohol. Alcohol is a toxic substance. It's full of poison, it's full of toxins. Something that they don't actually advertise when they're selling alcohol and when they're promoting alcohol in the industry, because of course it's a multi-million-dollar industry. Multi-billion-dollar industry. There's so much money in alcohol. So of course they're not going to promote this, but alcohol is a toxic, poisonous substance. And so of course what our bodies naturally do when we are drinking alcohol is they have to very quickly process all of the toxins that are going through our body to try and eliminate them as quickly as possible. So all the time we are drinking and we're building up a drinking habit where we're taking in more and more and more high quantities of alcohol, our body is working furiously hard to eliminate and process all of the toxins, all of the poisons that we're having to deal with. And while our body is putting all its energy into eliminating those toxins and dealing with them, it can't put its energy into the normal kind of everyday functions that it normally would be. So drinking lots of alcohol has an effect on our brain function, for instance. It has an effect on our skin. It has an effect on our energy levels, because it even has an effect on our physical health, because our bodies are having to deal with the alcohol so much day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. I really dread to think now what I was putting my body through when I was drinking. But our bodies are doing that. Our bodies are having to put all their energy into eliminating and dealing with those toxins. What happens when we stop drinking is that our bodies can go into a kind of shock period, in that they're no longer having to do what they've been doing for years. So they're having to readjust. So physically, our bodies go through a kind of readjustment period where they're readjusting, they're rebalancing, they're resettling into a different way of functioning. They're no longer having to get rid of all the toxins that we're taking in, but they are having to heal. They are having to heal all the parts of us that were affected by alcohol. So things like our liver, things like our brains. There are all sorts of parts of our bodies, our skin. There's all sorts of things that our bodies are having to then rebalance and resettle and readjust and reharmonize once we've stopped drinking. So we are going to go through a period of physical adjustment. We are also going to go through a period of mental and emotional adjustment, because not only has the alcohol that we've been drinking affected us physically, but it's also affected us mentally and emotionally. So if we imagine that we have some feel-good chemicals and hormones, dopamine is one, serotonin is another. What happens if we are a normally functioning, healthy person is that our brains have a little, let's take dopamine as an example. So our brains have a little kind of self-regulating dopamine factory. And our brains will naturally produce the dopamine that we need to help us feel good, to help us feel excited, to help us feel joy, to help us feel motivated, to help us feel energetic, to help us feel positive. Our brain produces in its own little factory all of this dopamine that helps us feel good. What happens is when we develop a regular drinking habit is our brains get a dopamine hit from the alcohol that we drink. What that means is that our natural dopamine factories start to shut down. They're kind of no longer required. So over time, they gradually shut down. And depending on the amounts of alcohol we're drinking, they shut down. And we get our dopamine hit from the alcohol that we're consuming. It's kind of like an artificial external dopamine hit. So over the years, the more alcohol that we're drinking, the more that dopamine comes from an external artificial source, the more our natural dopamine factories shut down. When we stop drinking, we are no longer getting that dopamine kick from anywhere. We're not getting it externally from the alcohol. We're not getting it internally from our natural dopamine factory. So we're not getting it from anywhere. So one of the things that needs to happen is our natural dopamine factory needs to start chugging itself into gear again. It might be a bit rusty, but it does need to start working again. And so that can take time for that to kick in and for the dopamine to naturally start reproducing itself and kicking in. So not only do we get a period of readjustment physically, we also get a period of readjustment mentally and emotionally as well. And this can have different effects on different people, and it can look very different for different people. So what does it look like? Well, one of the ways it can look is that for some people, the way that kind of dopamine and natural feel-good chemical factory in the brain can work is that it can suddenly go into overdrive. So for some people, we can feel joyous, we can feel liberated, we can feel energized, we can feel euphoric and highly motivated. And for others, we can feel depressed, we can feel exhausted, we can feel miserable. Because the dopamine factory might be really slowly chugging into gear and working methodically to get its levels and chemicals right as our body readjusts and our mind readjusts, it can take some time for that rebalancing and resettling and reharmonizing work to be done. And the way that our bodies work is all unique to us. So the way it looks for one person is very different to the way it looks for another person. Like I say, some people can feel that massive euphoria. Some people can feel exhaustion, miserableness, depression, lethargy, headaches, lack of sleep. But there is a combination of the emotional and the mental working kind of in conjunction with the physical. So our bodies are not only readjusting physically to lead to certain symptoms like headaches, like sleeplessness, like lack of energy. There can be all sorts of physical symptoms once we stop drinking and start learning to live our life sober. But that works in conjunction with the mental side of things as well, with depression, with anxiety, or with joy and positivity. It's going to have a different effect for different people. Now, it's not quite as simple as some people feeling all this joy and exuberance and energy and liberation, and some people feeling miserable and exhausted, there can be a kind of medium line to tread. And there can be a group of people for whom they feel a mixture of the two. So one day they can be feeling joyous, liberated and excited, and the next day they can be feeling bedridden, exhausted and fearful of facing the world. So there is no one size fits all is the message here. Whatever you are experiencing when you stop drinking, whether it's joyful, whether it's misery, that is perfectly normal and that is right for you. There is no right way or wrong way of doing this. The important thing to take away from this is that our bodies all work differently, our minds all work differently. And when your mind and body has been processing so much alcohol for so many years, there will be necessarily a period of readjustment. And that period of readjustment is temporary. It's a phase. So the ups and downs, or the steady climb, or the deterioration, then the climb, then the dip, then the climb, whatever it is for you, whatever it looks like for you, it's temporary. And eventually your body and mind will settle into a new, balanced, harmonized way of being. What else did I want to say? Oh, how long does it last is another question. How long does that period of readjustment and resettling last? Again, there is no one answer to this. It lasts as long as it lasts for you. And it depends on your context. It depends on the uniqueness of your body and your mind. And it depends on what you do to make the process easier on yourself. And that's probably best explained by me giving you my own example. So what did this look like for me? What this looked like for me was about, I can't remember the timings exactly, so don't quote me on this, but I think it was about 3 months or so of liberation, positivity, joy, that euphoric feeling, that feeling that sometimes some people refer to as the pink cloud. I had that, I think, for about 3 months or so, where everything was just, I was amazed at life. I was just feeling my life was transformed forever. And this was amazing. I was sleeping better. I had the energy. My brain was firing on all cylinders. I felt great. And in fact, there was one moment that I remember really specifically that was a really good example of this. And it was something really, really simple. It was a weekend, I think it was a Saturday, and I'd arranged to meet my mum and dad for lunch. And I arranged to meet them for lunch about a half-hour's drive away at one of these, I don't know if you get these in other countries, but in the UK we get these farm shops where they cultivate their own land, they have their own animals, and they sell their own produce in a little farm shop, usually in the middle of nowhere in the countryside. And you go in and there's stacks and stacks of fresh veg, fresh fruit, nice cheeses, nice meats, and they're selling their own meat that they've got from their own pigs, their own sheep, and often they have a nice cafe attached. So I met with my mum and dad at one of these farm shops, and we had a little mooch around the farm shop. We sat down and we had some lunch, and then we all went home. We went home our separate ways. But the reason this sticks in my mind is because it was mid-morning. I got in the car and I felt excited. I felt energized. I was looking forward to going to meet my mum and dad. Nothing strange about that, you might say. Well, no, not for normal people living normal lives. But in my drinking life, this would have been a major trauma for me. This would have been an ordeal because I would have woken up with a hangover. I would have woken up full of paranoia, self-consciousness, shame, guilt, stale alcohol fumes. I would have, because I used to experience a lot of anxiety and panic attacks, I would have been bringing on a panic attack on my journey there in the car. And I would have been terrified about the ordeal of going through with this lunch with my mum and dad and having to put on a brave face through the hungover, panicky, highly anxious feelings. I would have been putting on a really, really brave front. My mum and dad wouldn't have known that anything was wrong, but this would have been a massive strain on me. bodily, because I wouldn't have had enough sleep and I would be sort of trudging through the day, but also mentally, because I would be putting all that energy into faking some kind of happy normality. So the experience for me in my past, in my drinking days, would have been highly traumatic and a real ordeal. Whereas this particular morning, in this, whenever it was in my first 3 months of living my life sober, was joyous. It was just, oh my God, this is what normal people feel like. This is waking up without a hangover. This is getting in the car and looking forward to going to meet people. This is enjoying a lunch and enjoying mooching around the farm shop, looking at all the lovely cheeses and everything without a hangover. This is what living feels like. It was great. It was fantastic. And I remember just feeling like the rest of my life was going to be amazing if this is what it felt like. So for me, I almost immediately went into that joyful state. Whatever was going on in that dopamine factor in my mind, it had kicked into gear and it had gone into overtime, and it was just flooding me with the feel-good chemicals and hormones. So that's just one example, but generally the first 3 months were kind of that high for me. Then what happened for me was about a year plus of, how can I describe this accurately? Fear, terror, panic, anxiety. So I went from being up here to kind of sometimes crashing down mentally and emotionally. Physically, I was great, but mentally and emotionally, I was dipping, I was coming up, I was dipping, I was coming up. And the crashes and the lows got more and more severe. And it was over the course of about a year, possibly even more than that, but certainly a year, I had to learn how to deal with the issues that had led to my anxiety and panic. So after that initial 3 months of no anxiety, no panic, feeling great, feeling wonderful, the anxiety and the panic, I don't know, I guess my unconscious mind was kind of throwing its toys out the pram and going, no, we don't like this. We want you to go back to the familiar patterns, the familiar habits, the familiar medicine of alcohol to help you deal with your panic. We need the alcohol. And because it wasn't getting the alcohol, and it knew it wasn't getting the alcohol, it kind of threw all its toys out the pram and went, wah, don't like this. And so I'm going to throw lots and lots of panic at you. I'm going to throw lots and lots of anxiety at you to make you go back to drinking alcohol. And of course it didn't, because I was never going to go back to drinking alcohol. Even on my worst days, when I was experiencing extreme panic and anxiety, that was never on the menu for me, because I'd already flicked that switch in my mind that I was now a non-drinker. Alcohol just wasn't an option for me. So I went through about a year plus of learning how to deal with the issues that had led to anxiety and panic, and finding other strategies for dealing with the anxiety and the panic, and doing some work on that. So there are a couple of books that I read. There were a couple of strategies that I used. I used some of the tools in the Go Get Sober guidance program, which you can find on the website. If you haven't already been there, gogetsober.com, and you can sign up for membership, which gives you access to the amazing guidance program with lots of fantastic, empowering, life-changing tools and techniques that you'll find there. And I used lots of those tools and techniques to help me deal with the panic and the anxiety as well. And over the course of the year, with all of the work that I did, I kind of transformed things and went back to an even keel again. And now I would say my life is pretty much, if you had a scale of, this is say number 6 at the top of the scale, which is living life to the fullest and being as happy as you can possibly be and as energized as you can possibly be. And if this is 1 on the scale, which is feeling the worst you can be, I would say that my life now kind of does a normal kind of up and down between a 3 and a 6. And it kind of waves up and down. And very occasionally it might dip down to a 2. Very occasionally, rarely, in fact. So I've reached a kind of even keel, and I probably reached that even keel possibly about 2 years in to living my life sober. Again, I can't remember exact time scales, so I'm kind of just giving you a random idea. But certainly for me, the first 3 months were euphoric. And then about a year plus was terrible, and I had to learn how to work through these issues and deal with the panic, and then I reached that even keel. Now, for some people, it looks completely different to that. For you, it will look completely different to that. I know people who have stopped drinking and have just felt joy, energy, liberation right from the start, and that has pretty much carried on for them. I know people who have stopped drinking and it's been exhausting. It's been miserable. They've had migraines, they've had sleepless nights, they've put on weight. They have really struggled, but they have stuck with it. They've done the work. They've adopted the right mindset and the right approach. And gradually, bit by bit, they've climbed and they've gone from the 1 down here up to the 5 and 6 over time. And it's been a steady climb. And I know people for whom it's just gone up and down. It's just gone up and down from day one. So there is no right way and wrong way to experience this. It will be what it will be for you. The important thing to take away from all of this is that no matter how it is for you, the more that you can look after your own needs, the more that you can dedicate time to nurturing your body and your mind and allowing it to get as much rest, allowing yourself to get the rest, the relaxation, the nurturing, the nourishment that you need to make your body and your mind as resilient as possible while you're going through this period of readjustment and on into the future afterwards as well, to keep you there, to keep you maintaining that good level of energy and positivity. The more you dedicate time and space and energy to looking after yourself, to doing the stuff that makes you feel good, maybe it's the meditation, maybe it's the mindfulness, maybe it's the outdoors, the fresh air, the nature, maybe it's the animals, maybe it's reading, maybe it's art, maybe it's creativity, maybe it's sport. But whatever it is for you, making the time to do the things, even if it's just going to bed early with a good book and a cup of tea, whatever it is that works for you in terms of keeping you healthy and looking after your well-being, the more that you do of that, the easier that period of readjustment will be, and the quicker you will get to some kind of balanced endpoint that you can maintain into your future successful, happy and healthy sober life. That's it from me for today, Soberinos. I will look forward to catching up with you in tomorrow's Saturday Share in the Facebook group. If you're not already there, come along to the Go Get Sober Facebook group. You can find it easily with a search on Facebook. Just put in Go Get Sober and it will come up. I'll look forward to seeing you there in tomorrow's Saturday Share. In the meantime, let's go get sober together. Bye for now.